Hey everyone, we're Daniel Nicole Hernandez, pastor and worship leader in Columbus, Ohio.
Hola a todos, somos Daniel y Nicole Hernández, pastor y líder de adoración en Columbus, Ohio.
From September 15th to October 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month, and to celebrate, we want to share an exciting new project of Vineyard Worship. But before, we want to let you know that we have a National Association gathering coming up April 15th to the 18th called Better Together. Registration is opening soon, so be on the lookout and save the date. Recently, we have been working with Vineyard Worship to organize and increase resources for Spanish-speaking and bilingual churches.
Recientemente, hemos estado trabajando con Vineyard Worship para incrementar recursos para iglesias de habla hispana y bilingüe.
We have a new Spanish translation team with representatives from all over the U.S. and Latin America, and we are working to translate songs in a way that will work for the majority of our Spanish-speaking churches.
Hemos formado un nuevo equipo de traducción al español con representantes de todos los Estados Unidos y Latinoamérica, y estamos trabajando para traducir canciones en una manera que funcione para la mayoría de nuestras iglesias de habla hispana.
There are now Spanish translations of many of our Vineyard songs, along with bilingual songs that have intentionally been written in both Spanish and English. You can find all our Spanish music under the name Adoración Viña, Vineyard in Español, on Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and more. You can find all these resources and more at vineyardworship.com/adoracion and vineyardsongs.com. Links are in the show notes.
Puedes encontrar todos estos recursos y más en vineyardworship.com/adoración o vineyardsongs.com. Los enlaces están en las notas del episodio.
All right, friends, welcome back to the Ferment Podcast. My name is Mike O'Brien. I'm your guest host today. Thank you, Adam, for asking me to interview a dear, dear friend of mine. Today on the Ferment Podcast is Mr. John Meek, Jon.
That's correct.
Meek, yep. From the fine city of Chattanooga, Tennessee. John and I have been dear friends for years and years, and we are looking forward to this conversation. If you are a keyboardist in the church, you will get something from this podcast, I promise. If you are a youth director of some sort, or you've ever been in charge of anything youth related for a camp, you're going to get something amazing from this podcast, and so many other things. If you've been a CFO for a church or a bookkeeper, in addition to your duties as a worship leader, you're going to get something out of this. If you are a worship leader that does not lead necessarily from a vocal microphone, but you lead worship ministries, you lead whole things, or you're interested in that, you're going to gain a lot from this podcast. So welcome, John. We're so glad to have you.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
John, I know too much about you.
That's true.
But could you maybe give us a little idea of who you are, where you come from, and what you're passionate about?
Sure. So I'm from Chattanooga, and didn't grow up there, but moved there for college and found the Vineyard at the beginning of my sophomore year. So I've been in the Vineyard now well over 20 years. I've known you for most of those years. Yep. Fortunate to get involved and get plugged in with Vineyard Worship and doing some projects with them, and getting to do things like, play at these wonderful conferences we get to do sometimes, but also got on staff there at the local church, started as the bookkeeper because they needed somebody and I needed a job.
Sure.
And it's a good motivation to, work into sort of a ministry position. But then that just turned into one thing after another, ended up after a while being the worship director and also basically the administrative pastor, although I've never actually had a pastoral title. I kind of, for whatever reason, resisted that, and resisted being licensed or ordained, and so just kind of did the work anyway. And then, of course, you mentioned camp.
Sure.
In 2008, I had the opportunity to work my way into the job of being the director of Camp Vineyard. It was something where they needed someone, and I actually first got involved with that because they needed somebody to do a PayPal registration page. It was 2008, after all. Like, we need a PayPal registration page. John probably knows how to do that. And lo and behold, ended up directing the program, doing all the programming and coordinating all that. And that is my favorite week of the year. So Yeah, it's been a journey. I'm now not working for a church. I'm not.
Yeah.
My income doesn't come from ministry. I own a sign company, and I'm a sign maker for a living, and a youth camp director for 1 week of the year, and occasionally I get to play keys. So
Wow.
ultimately, I'm an easily bored only child. So this has
Cool.
been. I don't recommend this career path, but it's worked out great for me.
Yeah. That's amazing. And tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah. So my wife, Melissa, and I have been married since 2009. We have 2 kids, Olivia, who's 9, James, who's 6, and they are tremendous. They are here. They are loving. They're loving the national conference and all the kids programming, and just full of energy. And yeah, it's awesome. They are also very ready for school to start, because part of owning a sign shop means you got to work with Dad every day.
Wow.
And get real sick of being around the shop with Mom and Dad.
Wow. That's amazing. So how does it take all night to print some of these banners? Do they print overnight?
Yeah. I mean, well, so definitely, we definitely are set up to do that. We're a smaller shop, so there's some things we send out, but yeah, all the banners and large format stuff we do in-house. And usually, that's what I do, is I set stuff up to run overnight so that I can have myself free to do other things during the day.
So you and Melissa, when not on strike, you guys are in the background of major motion pictures, Netflix.
I'm in the background. She's in the foreground. We both played Russian scientists in season 3 of Stranger Things, and then and then she's been in a bunch of other stuff. Most recently, she was in a Zach Galifianakis Apple TV thing about the Beanie Bubble, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
And so she got to roller skate with Zach Galifianakis.
Wow.
Which is
amazing.
Just wild. She worked with Viola Davis in a what was it show? The First Lady. She was. My wife is an amazing seamstress in real life, and so she got to play Michelle Obama's seamstress.
Wow.
Which was amazing, and she got to wear a costume that she made herself.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
So what's more boring, like waiting around for film things to start back up, or studio things in the audio space?
Definitely, right? Right now, I mean, we're both, I'd like to do the film thing a little bit more, but my job isn't quite as flexible as hers, even though I'm still the boss. We've shifted to give her more flexibility to also be mom and work, take care of the kids. So yeah, she has some more flexibility for that. So we're eagerly awaiting. She's going to try to get in on season 5 of Stranger Things, which, how do you, fan theory your way into a Russian scientist somehow still being in town? It's fine.
Wow.
Whatever.
Okay. Well, that's all incredible.
Yeah.
John and I have been friends for a long time, and the main connection we've had over the years has not necessarily even been so many of these other ministry elements you've been a part of, but simply making music. So in the region of the Vineyard, if you're in a region, oftentimes you're doing events for your region or pastoral events. You just create friendships with other church leaders in the music world. And John and I did that early on between the churches in Atlanta, the Vineyard churches in Atlanta, and Chattanooga Vineyard over the years, Restoration Vineyard. And that's your current church name, Restoration
now,
Yeah, so all of our churches have kind of taken different turns and different names over the years, but we've served the pastors. We've put together 1,000 of these worship sets and drug up. We're here at the national conference, and we still drug gear up here.
Yep. That's what we get for being local.
You brought the Nord, I brought the bass amp. So we've been making music for a long time. And what fascinated me with John when we first met was he played the Hammond organ. Mm-hmm. And I was, listening to Wallflowers and Counting Crows and all that stuff back in the early 2000s. And John played Hammond on a few of my early records and recordings and worship things we did, and I was always just fascinated by that. And I've been so thankful that you've been around to play that thing, because it's just such a rare thing. So let's do some keyboard talk here at the top. Keyboard. You have played keyboard in my periphery, on my side for 500 worship sets over the years. Tell us. Hardly anybody ever talks about that position and that world. What is going on over there? What is going through your brain, Mr. Keyboard Person? What's happening?
Well, I mean, I have a very different approach to it than maybe a lot of the worship keyboard guys
Okay.
do. You know, because I mean these days it's a lot of like, oh, here's our set. Let's go find the main stage presets.
Yep.
And that's just what we're gonna do.
Yep.
And that's fine. I mean that's fine. It'll get you what what you want. But like you're right. You talked about Wallflowers. Talk about Petty. Like I like. Springsteen. Like I grew up listening to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I also grew up in a church. It wasn't a Vineyard church, but we did a lot of Vineyard music, and so we did a lot of the anything that kind of came out of Brownsville. We did songs from Brownsville, and so I grew up listening to and playing in church like that, which is a very different. It's a very different mindset than playing playing pads.
Yep.
And which it's fine, and you can do a lot with pads. You can get really creative with pads, but. But it just became how can I add texture and counter melody to what's going on here, while staying out of the way of the bass player with my left hand, while also staying out of the way of the guitar player and having some interplay there with trading things off and so that's usually what's going through my head is where are there spaces to add little moments, and where are there ways to work with the other mid-range instruments to and sometimes it's really simple. It's you need to be effectively the third guitar and just be playing power chords and lock in with the snare, and that's fine. Some of these big pop jams where you get to the big bridge, and it's just like, okay, we just need that. We need that low mid support.
Yeah.
That's going to fill things out awesome. But yeah, it's usually that kind of thinking through parts like that is usually what I'm trying to do, because I don't just want to be just texture. I feel like if I can add something, I want to add something, and then if I need to be just kind of texture or take a verse off, or take a chorus off, or maybe play the intro and then not play again until the second chorus. Like maybe that's what the song needs. How can I help arrange help in the arrangement of the song to give the song a story of its own as it moves through its arrangement.
That's amazing. So when you walk up, back before we brought our own instruments to gigs, we would use whatever the church had for drum sets and keyboards. And every Vineyard church, the Ferment reaches a lot of Vineyard churches, and really just contemporary, churches have been around for 20 years. What is the standard keyboard that's on stage, and what's that first sound that dials up for every church, pretty much every church in America? What is the standard?
It used to be some Yamaha workstation.
Okay.
A lot of places it still is, but a lot of them that I've seen, they'll have a Nord that they only ever use the piano plus patch on, which is like
it's a Ferrari with one.
Yeah. But that's because I've had a lot of churches ask me like, hey, we're thinking about getting a Nord, and so I'll ask them like, tell me about your keyboard players. Like, is the number of knobs going to freak them out? Because for some people, you want to give them. You want to give a player something that they feel comfortable playing.
Yeah.
And that because you don't have time on a Sunday morning to go out into the woodshed and figure out what all the stuff does. You just want to gravitate towards some bread and butter kind of sounds.
Yeah.
Which that's why I really recommend to some folks. It's like get the Yamaha workstation and ignore the sequencer thing, or just get the. There's a lot of keyboards that are not quite as intense as the Nord is that still sound great. But for me, I got the Nord for particular reasons, and because it was better than cramming my crappy little Saturn full of a Rhodes and an organ and a couple amps and everything else. But you walk in and it's like the first patch is always piano with some strings.
And the Vineyard pad.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe we can use that on a couple songs. Maybe we can find some other textures that work, and try to branch out just a little bit.
What happens to a piano player when I tell the piano player to turn the pad string thing down and just go straight piano? There's often a look of fear and horror in their eyes. Why is that? What is it that pad does that's helping?
It gives you it gives you so much sustain, and the piano itself is a percussion instrument, and so you all of a sudden are, when you're just playing diamonds and you're just playing diamonds for the whole song, you feel very exposed.
Yeah.
So if you're just playing on the downbeat and not playing any other little thing in the middle, or you're playing the I can't demonstrate with my hands on an audio podcast. This is always a problem of mine when I do these things. But there's kind of like there's the typical piano rhythm that a lot of piano players play. It's like drummers reverting to the adult contemporary version of the amen break, or guitar players acoustic guitar players all learn like the same first rhythm, and they stay there a lot sometimes. There's one of those for piano too.
Yeah.
And so they feel very exposed by that, where the pad just gives you this texture and it sounds cool, and you just let it ride.
So if we're doing Waymaker, the strum on the piano is bonga, boom, bonga.
Yeah.
Waymaker, miracle worker, bonga, boom, bonga.
Exactly.
Whereas if you have the pad, you could just play one note or a couple notes, and it helps fill out the space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it if you're not used to thinking, I mean, a lot of piano players, they're so used to playing by themselves that that's why they overplay, or they're coming to piano later and they're not comfortable yet with improvisation and with picking out counter melodies and finding parts. So there's that like I find a lot of church musicians are kind of in that ground, that they're fine, like they're fine playing in a band and they're an asset to your team, but they're not. You can't lean on them yet for those parts, and all the toys kind of gloss over that and don't force them.
Why are
that.
keyboard players in particular, guitar electrics as well, and everybody in general, but in particular keyboard players, why are we so afraid of space?
Ooh. I mean, when you learn piano, generally you learn it as a solo instrument.
Yeah.
Which means you're learning how to create the whole thing. You've got your left hand providing not just the lower frequencies, but also much of the rhythm, while you'll have, I mean, if you get into some more upper intermediate level stuff, you've got, the middle part of your, or lower part of your right hand is providing harmony, while your top three fingers are doing, the melody and giving you some, some other things that are going on. So I mean, ultimately it gets to the point where your left hand is very busy doing a couple of things, your right hand's very busy doing a couple of things. And so if that's what you're used to, and I mean, I was never classically trained. I had a teacher who tried to do that with me and realized that, oh no, she has a very stubborn ear player on her hands. And so she just beat me over the head with theory. She's like, no, at least you're going to learn theory.
Cool.
So that's been an asset. But getting back to the parts, it's like it's tough to break that habit of filling up all the space that's available. Because that's what you learned how to do with this instrument that has so much range. And then you add on top of it all the sounds you can add. It's like, oh, I can add strings, or hey, I can turn. This is a personal pet peeve of mine. I apologize to the keyboard players listening to this, but I'm going to call some of y'all out. Adding like the bass, like an upright or electric bass tone to the left hand. It's like, I don't see a P bass on stage. Why am I hearing a P bass? Like if you want to do that, then okay, fine. Put in low end of simple, organ patch down there, or a Rhodes without all the chorus and junk, just to, something to thicken it up. But
you just said the word Rhodes.
Oh, yeah.
So let's just say we have a Nord, or we have like a decent stage piano. We've got the piano sound. We've got that Vineyard pad string sound right behind it. We know that we can turn that pad up and down or off, and that's okay, right?
Okay,
That would be good. The vulnerability of not playing and not having sound is okay. That's what makes music so wonderful, is that it starts and it stops. And many of us, like you said, we're used to playing all by ourselves. We're used to being the boss. And when you have 10 drumsticks on your hands, 10 fingers, you can make up for a lot of sins on the stage. And a lot of our churches don't need to make up for it, because we've got the players there and we need to give them space to play as well. So the piano is a brilliant sound. The strings are a brilliant sound. The pad is a brilliant sound. Rhodes, Wurlitzer organ. If I don't want to get off this podcast without explaining that to those who might hear that and go, what is that? I've always wondered what that is.
Okay, so Rhodes and Wurlitzer are both electric pianos. They are electromechanical instruments in real life, which means like they are actual like physical things that are moving and being hit. So they both work a little bit differently, but they fundamentally both have pieces of metal that are certain lengths that are being hit by hammers. And the pieces of metal are vibrating and being picked up by pickups, like you would have in an electric guitar. So that their different tones come from the different mechanisms. I'm not going to bore you with all that. I've had the good pleasure to own and work on them, so I could nerd out about that if you want. But basically, they each have their own different tone. The Wurlitzer has, generally speaking, a sharper tone to it. So the more the like like Ramsey Lewis is who's jumping to mind, just because there's one song, now I can't think of the name of it. It's on the Ramsey Lewis trio, like the record's that name, where it's just him, and it just kills it, man. And just like the crowd going around was going nuts. Anyway, so Wurlitzer has a very distinct kind of sound that way. Rhodes is generally more mellow, although because it's more flexible, you know people could tune or voice them different ways.
Yeah.
So that the sometimes they're sharper, sound more like a Wurlitzer. Like Get Back is actually a Rhodes.
Yeah.
The solo on Get Back is actually a Rhodes, which I honestly for years did not know until I watched the Beatles thing. You know, I was like, wait, because I've always played that as a on a Wurlitzer. You know, but you know the Rhodes can be more mellow.
Yep.
It can be the one that's good in lieu of maybe a pad.
Yeah.
You just do Rhodes. You know, diamonds. Just play the open chords on the downbeat on the one.
Yeah.
And you let that ring out. And then, you know, don't do, like, you don't have to get super chorusy.
Yeah.
You don't have to do, because, I mean, the Rhodes definitely went through an evolution of, like, the Dino Rhodes, where it's really bright with a lot of chorus, and that's a whole tone unto itself. But, like, with Rhodes especially, you get to start thinking a little more like a guitar player, because the sound itself is, the timbre is such that you can add a lot to it if you want, but it takes effects well, as the guitar player.
So as a worship leader, we might have song 1, song 2, kind of upbeat, up-tempo. I might turn to you and say, hey, kill that pad on song 1, because we want it to just be really percussive. Song 2, can you brighten up your piano a little bit? Right? Brighten up your piano a little bit. This is what language we would use. And then song 3, we'd maybe do I Love Your Presence. And I'd say, you know, John, why don't you do Rhodes or Whirly? That might be a language we use. So Rhodes or Whirly, just a mellower piano sound. And for some that have never used it, it feels so disingenuous to dial that sound in. You feel like a fraud, but you should use it. You should try it. You should experiment with it with your 58-year-old piano person that's never tried it. It can be an exploration.
Yeah, it can, because the Rhodes lends itself well to doing cluster chords in kind of the middle of the piano, and you get these really rich textures out of it that you can be very simple in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But it sounds awesome. It sounds very complex.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not. It's a simple tricks.
Yeah.
Which is most of what I do is simple tricks that I've stolen from other people.
And you can add a distortion to it, and it sounds cool. It sounds right instead of wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, just a little touch of and well, this is something, you know, especially going back to the Nord, but others that do this. So I know Korg makes something that's like this. There's a few others I think I've seen, but basically it's you get to start adding to the sound with things that are there on the front panel, and that's where, you know, you get to experiment more as a player. Little bit of delay, tap it into the right tempo, please. A little bit of grind, you know, a little bit of drive to it, and you can get some really, again, it's almost like a pad, but a little bit more rhythmic, and you don't have to worry about the super long decay that the pad might have that just turns everything into mush. You get some more defined parts out of it.
Yeah.
But then you have to be careful with the Rhodes, not to, you know, as you go up the keyboard, it can start sounding like a doorbell if you do it wrong.
Yeah.
And you don't want that, you know, you don't want the doorbell sound. You don't want the NBC sound coming out. You know, it shouldn't sound like that unless that particular timbre is exactly what the song needs in that one moment. Yeah. But that's going to happen once in, you know, a dozen sets. It's not going to be like, oh, well, this week is my moment now for, you know, this thing every week.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I would just say in summary, before we talk a little organ, is worship leaders, I encourage you to get behind that keyboard at your church. Whatever you got, open it up, look for the PDF manual, and worship leaders, even if you're not a keyboardist, try to study it and get 2 or 3 great piano sounds, a brighter one, a darker one, an organic sounding one. Get 2 or 3 electric piano sounds, the Rhodes, the Whirly. Beg, borrow, steal until you can get some really good presets for the people in your church, so we're not just machines coming in and people just playing the same timbre. We have these Ferraris and we're only using these, you know, we're using one cylinder, staying in first gear. We can explore so much more.
Yeah. It is very important to experiment, and I think that advice to the worship leaders themselves, especially those that aren't, you know, that might lead from another instrument.
Sure, it's
really important for them to know the tools that are at their players' disposal, because you as the leader, I mean, you are there to serve your team.
Yeah,
and that's one way you can serve your team is setting something up for them if they're not comfortable with it, or knowing what is possible very easily for them.
Yeah,
because, you know, I mean, we're all as musicians growing as we serve, and it's so cool to see when you do have, I mean, you mentioned, the 58-year-old keyboard player. I mean,
Yep.
I've definitely had, folks kind of like that on my teams before, and it's cool to coach them and see them rediscover a love of exploration on the instrument.
And when I say 58, I'm also saying 17-year-old classical guitar,
Yes.
classical piano. I'm saying somebody that's thinking traditionally and has been in a rut and hasn't thought of the keyboard as 27 different instruments,
Right.
but as a piano.
Right. Yeah, and I'd also say this, like, we may get around to talking about software in a bit, but don't feel like you have to fall down the rabbit hole with software.
Sure.
See what you have already.
Yep.
And I mean, because all musicians, we're always just one piece of gear away from being great, right? Just one more expensive piece of gear away from being great. And we don't,
Sure.
but we don't spend, we don't go spend 2 hours with the thing we have.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can spend 2 hours with the thing you have,
Yeah.
whether or not you're necessarily the keyboard player, but spend 2 hours with the thing you have and understand it better,
Yeah.
you're going to be better that next Sunday.
Mm.
Automatically, you're just going to be that much better that next Sunday.
That's so good. So tell us a little bit. What's a Hammond? What is a B3? A C3? What is the organ?
It is the voice of God, my friend.
I mean, this is a church podcast.
Yeah.
Every episode we should have 10 minutes of organ talk.
Right. Well, it's a vineyard thing though, so you guys talk about probably your acoustic guitars all the time or something. I don't know. But yeah. So okay. A Hammond is also an electromechanical instrument. The sound's produced, and real ones is produced by little discs spinning around 60 times a second, and the indentations on the disc, the number of indentations on each disc determine what frequency it makes.
Yeah.
And once again, it's spinning around right in front of a pickup, so there's 91 of those things inside of a real Hammond.
Yeah.
And the drawbars then take each one of those individual tones and give you up to nine tones per single key you're playing. So you can have all 9 out, press middle C, and you've got 9 notes playing. You've got, an octave below.
Yep.
You've got a fifth above. You've got an octave above. You've got an octave and a fifth above. You've got 2 octaves above, 3 octaves above. 2 and a third, 2 and a fifth, then 3 above. And it's nuts.
Wow.
I mean, it has it is a synthesizer. It's an additive synthesizer.
Wow.
And you are then adding these different tones and shaping the tone. What's great with drawbars is that you're literally shaping it with your hands, which is really cool. And it really rose to prominence in the 60s and 70s as far as being used more in rock and being used in music that influenced sort of what we still do in worship.
Yeah.
But then in churches, you kind of got the church organ sound. I mean, you can add vibrato or chorus just with the organ itself. Then, of course, it is plugged into, hopefully, a Leslie, which is, man, it's the craziest invention. It's like, okay, we're going to take this thing that's already very complicated
Sure.
and over-engineered, and then we're going to then throw it into a speaker where the speakers are split. Lower frequencies to go 800 hertz and below goes to the lower rotor,
Yeah.
and then above goes to the upper, and then these things are going to spin around.
Sure.
It's like what made Don Leslie think of that?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, that's just inspiration. That's the Holy Spirit right there. So, yeah, I really the Leslie is like 80% of the sound.
Yeah.
Of what you're expecting, and good Leslie simulations will make or break. I mean, because I'll play some digital organs, and the basic tone will be good, but then you hit that Leslie to fast, and it just sounds like a phase pedal. You're like, oh, okay, that fell down big time. So, yeah, that's a whole other. I mean, the organ you have to play differently than piano. The organ is not. It's not a percussion instrument.
Yeah.
I mean, it has. You can say, oh, well, it has percussion on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, fine, but you can play it rhythmically, but really it's that middle ground between just being a pad and also having enough presence, like enough tonal presence, so that it can be the solo instrument. It can also be way too much frequency space taken up by this thing.
Yeah, it's a beast. It's like it's 4K, it's HD, it can do so much. It's very hard to play well, but certainly in the black church, it has been foundational. And just for our rock and roll bands, as you mess with it, it can be really fun and just experiment with it. But you play that thing so well. Vineyard Worship, if you listen to the song Not Be Moved on the Not Be Moved record, That's John.
I'm playing piano on that.
You're playing piano.
Casey's playing organ on that.
So Casey's playing organ on it, but John's playing piano, and it's this incredible. Like we did, I don't know, 12 takes of that song, and every single take was just amazing. We had the Leslie speaker in the back, and it was bleeding into the main room.
Yeah.
It was just glorious.
Yeah.
So if you're curious about what that sounds like, with some good gospel infused piano, "Not Be Moved" on the "Not Be Moved" record is so good.
And in more of the kind of Tom Petty context, you also have "The World Can't Take It Away" on that record.
Yeah,
which is me playing organ on that one.
So good.
And that song. That song was, for the longest time at Vineyard Chattanooga, our sound check song. Because like everybody knew it, and it's just fun.
Yeah.
And it's easy. It's this big, like American summer rock jam kind of style. And it's good. So, yeah.
So one thing I was going to tell everybody, if you want just to explore some of more of these organic keyboard sounds and get some inspiration, one documentary I think of is the Rolling Stones guy, Chuck Leavell, right?
Yeah.
He's got a documentary on Amazon. It's the name of it. I'm forgetting it. Is there any other video or documentary that you can think of that? I mean, certainly some of the Tom Petty stuff with Benmont.
Benmont Tench, yeah. I've made a career of ripping off Benmont Tench.
So yeah, get some inspiration. The next thing I want to talk with you about, John, and the final thing I want to talk about is youth, because you are a boss of this amazing youth camp here in the Southeast. But before we finish up with that, you have been in board situations of churches. You've been helping as a bookkeeper, which I don't know how many bookkeepers we've had on the Ferment. Kind of in that CFO position for church plants, for creating buildings, buying gear, hiring, firing, et cetera, For our worship community, we don't think about the money much. We just think, well, we get paid or underpaid or overpaid. What are some things we can think about as worship leaders, facilitators? What kind of authority do we have? What kind of questions can we ask those who are taking in the money and distributing it out? That would just be important. Maybe some things for us to think about: capital investments versus budgets and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, so I'll go back to one thing I said earlier is, I said jokingly, but it's true that we have a tendency to feel like we're always one expensive piece of gear away from being awesome.
Sure.
And there are no few sellers out there that will convince you of that fact.
Yeah.
And so we as stewards of the budgets that we do have need to be aware that, there's that's always going to be a trap. That being said,
sure,
we need to, I think it's important for us on the ministry side to take the time to really understand like what makes a piece of gear worth it.
Yeah.
For your particular context. Because like a U87 sounds great. You don't need a U87 on a Sunday morning.
Microphone, yeah.
Right, a microphone, yeah. Like that's an amazing, standard studio microphone.
Sure.
That every A-level studio in the world has a locker full of them.
Yep.
But they're way overkill. You don't need to come to your board and say, "Hey, I want to go spend $2,000 on a mic." You need to say, "Hey, maybe you need to spend $2,000 on mics, but it's to get, drum mics that don't sound like they were the Shure PG whatever, or whatever." I mean, it's just learning a little bit about the technical side of stuff, so that you don't have to waste all your time doing all the comparisons of all the gear reviews and stuff, but learning a little bit about what makes things good for certain applications. I mean, there's YouTube videos that'll.
What's the difference between budgets and capital expenses?
Yeah. So capital expenses are things that you're going to do. You're going to buy once, and they're going to stick around for years and years and years and years. Budgets are the amount of money set aside for just the regular expenses of the ministry throughout the year. So that could be, and a lot of times for budgets, it's spent on taking your volunteers out to coffee.
Yep.
I mean, that's churches run on coffees and lunches. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, any volunteer organization does, but especially in a church. Whereas capital investments are going to be things like, all right, we need to, we have this little Casio digital piano we've had as a church plant for the last 5 years. we've got a little bit of money in the bank. Can we
Yeah.
go spend $2,000 on getting a Nord Stage 2 off a reverb or
Yeah.
something, like buying used gear?
So they
that's in good
can't be
shape.
separate things,
Yes.
because if we say, well, we're going to buy a Nord in 2024, well, we're not going to be able to take anyone out for coffee for 2 years,
Right, exactly.
or buy pizza for the
Exactly.
worship team meeting, because we just blew our quote unquote budget.
Right.
So a lot of times people are just mixed up with that.
Yes,
They don't know
exactly.
how to ask for
Yeah,
it separately.
Exactly, and that's where making a case. I mean, you're going to have to make a case to your board that this is a
Yeah.
good use of the church's funds, but saying, hey, this is, here are the reasons why this suits our situation.
Yep.
And I mean, for we at Restoration, we're kind of in a little bit of this process now. We had the opportunity to make some investments in replacing they started with like this Mackie, board that was okay for what they were doing, but they were wanting to really up the live stream and also just make it a little more bulletproof for
Yeah.
volunteers to run week in, week out. So I was like, well, let me see what I can find. And I found a deal on an M32R Midas board. That's, it's a really nice sounding board. Like
Yeah.
that thing that's a great board. And
Yeah.
for our situation, it's kind of a little overkill, but I found a great deal on it.
Sure.
And it made sense to the board. Like everybody was on board about it. And that lets us do so many things.
Yeah.
And it makes so many things very easy so that I don't have to be there to run it every week.
Yeah.
I can hand it off to somebody who's still learning about it, who's watching YouTube videos during the week and coming
Yep.
in and trying stuff. So that that's a capital investment, and
Yep.
it's an investment also in the increasing the quality of our of what we're able to do, while also serving our volunteers well and giving them something that's usable for them out of the gate, and
Yes.
actually makes their job easier, even
Yep.
though it's actually technically a much more complicated thing.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like a Zildjian 15-inch K dark cymbal.
Yeah.
My buddy who hadn't played with in 10 years, he came back to our church and he saw that same cymbal sitting there,
Yeah.
and he's like, dude, I love this cymbal. Same snare drum.
Yeah.
The Ludwig Black Beauty that we bought, for $570
Yep.
15 years ago is still there. So those are investments.
Mm-hmm.
And a Nord, to the point of the Nord, that red keyboard you see everywhere, those are $5,000.
Yep.
And yours, you've had
I still have mine from 08. Yeah, bought it in 2008.
08.
I do.
And you
I do
play
wait.
it.
I play it,
Yeah.
and I had to wait for them to build more. That's how new they were. But yeah, I've had that one since late 2008, and I mean that
Yeah.
like these things, when you are able to do that kind of a quality, the tool will last.
Yeah.
Versus the 3 for $100, mono price mics that will last 6 months to a year,
Yeah.
sound bad the whole time, and eventually break.
Yeah,
But they
there's-
fit the budget.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's lots of gadgets that
Yeah.
we buy that just are not helpful for their long haul.
Nope.
And we just need to be patient and careful with that. But yeah, I encourage everybody to make sure, even if you're a volunteer and you don't get paid a single penny, there might be a space for you to ask for some ministry budget to say, hey, well, I still have to pastor these people. I
Right.
still have to buy some lunches and coffees, and I'd like to buy a gift card for the sound guy. So I think it's good to ask for those things. And then, over time say, hey, have a dream list of some capital things you'd like to make.
Yeah, and if you can only
investments.
pick one of those things, pick the lunches and coffees. That's
Yeah.
far more important than
Absolutely.
the gear, because you have to be investing in your people. You have to be
Yep.
building a shared story with them. So building that trust with them as you go through that. You can't you can't just
Yeah.
impress them with the technical aptitude. That becomes very dangerous.
John, what's the secret of this? Like, you've been in these second chair positions. I've joked that, like, welcome to the ferment, John, pastor, youth group leader,
Right.
worship leader, but you've actually carried the title of none of these things. You've been paid, little honorariums, and, the church loves to use the word stipend,
Right.
You've been stipend and honorarium to death.
Yep.
I've probably handed you an iTunes gift card for the value of $10 for driving to Asheville and back. Over the years, you've just been faithful in these second and third and fourth chair positions through a circus of leaders and elders and pastors and the whole thing above you, quote unquote,
Right.
in the power pyramid. You've held less power, but you've given more and you've served more than most. What is your motivation? What keeps you going?
You know, I joked about being an easily bored only child, but it is kind of true. I just, for me, what's funny is you're bringing up something that I kind of I preached about a couple weeks ago, because we were going through Ephesians and at the beginning of Ephesians 4.
Sure.
And it talks there about the different gifts that God gives of apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers, and I said look, like, ultimately we're going to get to a point in Ephesians where Paul is talking about mutual submission as well, and really these gifts are interdependent, that they depend on each other, and we especially in the Western Church have this a very different power dynamic model in our heads than I think Paul was envisioning. So to me, it's not, it really, this sounds cheesy, but it really hasn't been about having the title. But I've always, I haven't always enjoyed the job, but I have enjoyed the jobs.
Yeah.
And to me, that's more important necessarily than having the title.
Sure.
And doing the work and seeing the tangible results, or sometimes seeing the intangible, the intangible results of it. I don't, I say I don't want to be bored, but that's kind of part of it. Is I don't want to. I don't know. I don't want to stagnate in one thing, and also, something that comes with the titles a lot of times is that you get scared to hand it away.
Wow.
And because you just were protecting your title because you care about the title.
Yeah.
And I should also say I've never had a corporate job really. I've always worked in small business. I got a computer information systems degree and then went and sold guitar and taught piano, which is exactly what you're supposed to do instead of going into IT.
Yeah.
I worked at the church as a bookkeeper and then the admin pastor, and all that other stuff we talked about. And, I do Camp Vineyard and there I do have a title because someone has to be called camp director.
Sure.
Whatever. It's about not getting so focused on that and more focused on the results.
Yeah.
And the ends that we're aiming for. If we're getting that, then I'm happy.
And how do you deal with, going well into my 40s here in ministry? I'm looking at people with that have had real jobs for 20 years, 30, and they're talking about their pensions and their, all their things that they've acquired just from the stability of being in the marketplace or working in business. And you could be making, just knowing your brain and the way you work, you could be doing a lot of things in a lot of cities, which would give you a lot of stability financially and otherwise. How do you work through that? Is there a battle with the Lord? Do you...
Not really. That's the nice thing about when I went back into the marketplace. I initially was entirely self-employed. My wife and I, own an invitation company, and so we were both working full-time at that, trying to grow that. And we kind of figured out, okay, there was a cap to that, and we hit that cap and said, all right, well, in order to go beyond that, it's going to, is that what we want to do? Is that the life that we want to live and the kind of business we want to build? And ultimately, it wasn't. She wanted to be able to be still very personally involved with her clients.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that, we sort of set that business at a level that, and the Lord has been good, that's still kind of the level it's at.
Yeah.
And it allows her now flexibility to be mom and all that, but still, brings part of our financial stability to the home.
Sure.
The other part of it is then I went and got kind of fell into the job at the sign shop.
Yeah.
And ultimately we were able to purchase that. God's brought us through a lot of stuff. The Lord has been faithful. I always preached on provision a few months ago.
Yeah.
And shared this prayer that I have many, many times, sometimes multiple times a week, where you wake up at 3 a.m. and everything's scarier at 3 a.m.
Wow.
And you're just laying there, and I'll be worried about something, and a lot of times it's money.
Yeah.
And it's like, nope, the Lord is our provider. The Lord has been our provider. The Lord will be our provider. And I just do that as a breath prayer over and over and over.
Yeah.
And it calms me down, settles my limbic system, helps me get back to sleep, and all that good, physiological stuff. But also recenters my spirit on what is true.
Yeah.
yeah, owning two businesses that sounds really fancy. Like we're not, I drive an '05 Colorado that has beat up paint. I'm not trying to impress anybody,
That replaced your Saturn.
Yeah, I actually still have the Saturn. And it still runs. But I needed a truck.
Oh, it's amazing.
We've lived simply. We've lived within our means, and when we're able to, we've been able to, do a little more. But just trying to live simply and just appreciate what we do have, because I do see. That's been the interesting thing about getting plugged into with a sign company, getting plugged into more of the local businesses.
Sure.
Because Chattanooga is an old money town. It's an old money town. Some of it going back far enough that how that money was gotten is, little something. So there's a lot of history there, we'll say, and a lot of it is ugly. And
wow.
Anyway, it's just meeting some of the movers and shakers, and it's like, okay, sure, if I was making $200,000 a year or something like that, I guess would be cool, but how much happier are the people that I meet that are doing that?
Yeah.
Or how much are they just trying to protect their title and protect, this thing? It's like, man, I get to, with what I've got, I get to do stuff like this.
Yeah.
I get to do my various other very nerdy pursuits.
Yeah.
I get to come to the national conference and, hang out with my friends.
Good. Yeah.
And, of course, I get to take a week off and go to Cam Vineyard.
Yeah.
It's like, awesome. I'm not
so
going to be able to
freedom.
do that.
Yeah. Free. If you were guys with brains like yours, most of my friends with guys like brains like yours are in their basement with 4 computer screens around them and one of those headsets.
Yeah.
And they're killing it. Money.
Yeah.
They're high up in their, and they love it. That's what God's called them
Good
to,
for them.
is those places, and they're actually pretty happy with it. So I love that you've got this brain you've got, and the leadership abilities you have, the creativity you have. Certainly you're giving it to business and entrepreneurial stuff for your family, but you're leaving a big chunk of margin for the kingdom and kingdom bucks.
You're right.
And it's just so encouraging just to see it. And I am, as your brother in Christ and a friend, I'm less lonely on the journey because you're on it with me.
I appreciate that.
And it's just a joy, and I hope that's an encouragement to many out there that are just in that place of feeling like the wolves are at the door, and you're
yeah.
So
we very early on in our marriage, we got plugged in. There are other programs out there, but we did FPU, and that was really good for us. And just getting, while we were young, being able to get out of debt and get more settled that way was huge. Now, not everybody's in that situation.
Yeah.
I understand that. But doing something, whether it's that or something else, to kind of get that financial piece, PIECE, in going. That's one of the, I loved, there's the developing healthy or sustainable health, whatever it was. I can't, all the workshops here have very long titles, I feel like. So I'm sorry, Danielle, I do not remember what the title of your workshop was, but I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome.
And it was really cool that was a part of it. And so I know the Vineyard has some resources that they're doing now for that. And so if that's you and you need that help, reach out and get it, because
that's so good.
It's huge to settling you down to do these other things when when my position dried up at Vineyard Chattanooga, because we'd built a building and all of a sudden it was just way too expensive, and I was sort of the last expendable staff member, at least my salary was. That was I was like, okay, that's
wow.
All right, I'll just go. We're going to go sell invitations and see how that does for 6 months. And, it did well enough. And I was able to still, there were a few of us kind of in that same few months, because I know you had a transition around that same time too. And some other guys I can think of that I'm still friends with, that, we went from these paid staff positions that they didn't pay much, but they were paid staff.
Sure.
That's a thing, and to be thankful for. All of a sudden, it's gone, and you get a handshake, and in your case, you got an organ. I didn't get an organ. I just got laid off. But
to John's point, when I was laid off from my position because the church was just not doing well financially, instead of paying me 6 months severance, they gave me the Hammond organ.
Yes. A good sounding one.
Yeah,
too.
it's
a good
great.
sounding one.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, but yeah, there were a bunch of us that were kind of in similar situations in that same time period, and it's been not all of us stayed involved in ministry, and I think that's a little hard. I mean, especially because some of these guys I think of they do have some amazing talents, and everybody's on a journey. We're not all we're not static. We're not all going to do the exact same thing for the next 30 years. So.
Sure. As we wrap up with this other idea, across the vineyard, we're here at the national conference and in our little denomination of 500 churches across the country in different regions, that a lot of our churches have been going at it for decades.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of people in these second, third, and fourth chair positions that are not senior pastors. They're not overseeing huge initiatives with separate budgets or anything, but they're just these faithful worker bees throughout the vineyard in all the regions. I met all these folks over the years, people overseeing kids' objectives and trying to gather resources for preachers or gather resources for youth and music and just trying to help the church from a place of influence that's rooted in service, in serving others and looking for the marginalized. And then one of these people that saw a need in the youth of our region and really picked up the mantle and been doing it for years and years. I've heard rumors of it because we've always made music together. So I've always been like, John's a music guy. What's this youth thing he does? That's so weird. And it's always just, that's as far as it's gone for me until my son turned 12 and I came to Camp Vineyard here in the Southeast, came to Camp Vineyard with my son this year, and I slept in the bunks and did the whole thing. And I know all the cliches. I know the memes. I'm a TikTok master, but I wasn't prepared for just the experience, how amazing it was, how incredible of a leader you are. Not only that you're just a good leader, but you have this sea of 50, 75, 100 volunteers or people that even pay to come. They have to pay to come, that you've over these years have built this incredible thing called Camp Vineyard. So tell us when it started and leave us with some inspiration for the youth of America.
Absolutely. Oh man, this is, I listen, I know the youth got problems, but the youth have always had problems. We got some good ones. We got some really good ones in the Vineyard. So it started in 2008. Jeff, my senior pastor at the time and boss at the time, was an old Young Life guy and wanted to do a youth camp and kind of the Young Life model, but be kind of the step after Young Life. So Young Life gets you all the way up to the last night, and that's the Come to Jesus talk. We do the Come to Jesus talk the first night, and then we start talking about what does this kingdom life look like for you, that we are all charged to be ministers of the gospel, whether or not that's our job title. And so let's talk about what praying for one another looks like. Let's talk about what it can look like to serve one another, and not just be so focused necessarily on feeling like it's somebody else's job to do ministry. So one of the things I want to say is that Camp Vineyard, I realize this more and more as the years go by, Camp Vineyard is a set of values. It's not a program.
Yeah.
You could take all of my games and go do them somewhere else. And if you don't have all the values behind why we do things the way we do, and the 100 little decisions you make throughout the day that those values inform, then it's just not going to be the same thing. It'll be fun. I'm pretty good at programming a youth camp, and I've got some really good people around me to help. Yeah. But there's a set of values there that inform it, and one of it really is young leadership. Yeah. We're telling the kids, hey, we want you to go home and get plugged in doing ministry one way or another. Yeah. And that because we want to give these kids an identity in the Vineyard that has nothing to do with their parents. Sure. Give them something that's not just, it's my parents' church. Now we realize, most of these kids probably when they leave high school, they probably will end up somewhere else. Some of them will stick in the Vineyard, and that's great. Sure. But we're releasing and planting seeds, and I hope that they are a blessing to wherever they land with some of the things that they've learned at camp. But in order to, if we say we value young leadership, we then have to put our money where our mouth is. Yeah. And the most visible way to do that is most of the time the band that I hire will be made up. At least half of it will be campers. Yeah. Will be teenagers. Yeah. Or kids who like the previous year had just graduated. I've got a 2-year eligibility rule, where like they can play for 2 years and then you're done. That's cool. So it makes me, keep finding more
Yeah.
people. Actually, it makes Bess keep finding more people because Bess now books for me. She's awesome. And yeah, it's so great because you get to see. I mean, this year we had a drummer that had just finished 8th grade.
Wow.
Now, did he play like he was a drummer going to 9th grade? Yeah, kinda. He played that crash cymbal all the way from the top of the stand all the way to the floor.
Sure, yeah.
A few times. You're like, okay, that's a little much.
Yeah.
But it was so cool to see the 6th grader that's in my church who's learning drums. He's like, oh man, I want to play drums at camp. I'm like, all right, buddy, here's a few things you need to work on.
Yeah.
And give him some measurable things he can go do. And it's so awesome because then these kids, they see that we're serious about it, and we earn that that trust with them, so that when we talk about the spiritual stuff, like they begin to believe that we actually mean what we say. I say in all of our stuff we do the silly so that we can be heard on the spiritual. We fully commit to both. We are 100% all right. If we're going to do silly games, if we're going to do things like the team names, the team flags, the team cheers, where everybody gets up in front of everybody and looks like a dork, that's great. We're going to fully commit to that. And then because we've built that shared story, we're starting to write this shared narrative. We have this level of trust we're beginning to get with with each other. That then when we say, all right, we're going to pray, come Holy Spirit, let's see what happens.
Wow.
No hype.
Yeah.
We do the light and sound thing, whatever. I mean, that's all fine.
Sure.
But when it comes to the serious stuff, we dial it down. It's very Vineyard. It's very much just we're going to pray and see what happens.
That's cool.
And like when you commit to these things and you're serious about it, and I mean, because the kids want something real and they can smell fake a mile away.
Yeah.
They know when they're being hyped.
Sure.
They know when they're being sold, and you're not, like I said, it's a set of values. It's not a program. So the ways that you can build that trust, the ways that you can then lean on that trust to get them to branch out and just give it a shot. That was actually that was a theme this year, really, for me. And I don't know what it was. I don't usually, like during ministry time, I'm not usually talking to the kids way in the back, but this year it was really heavy on me. There were a couple times I don't always talk during ministry time either. I lean on my other other pastors and the people I have around me that are the different positions on the team. I won't use a bunch of terms that no one will know, but this year it was really heavy on me. It's like, all right, you kids in the back, like, just give it a shot. Like that's all I'm asking you to do is just give it a shot.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's not in my hands. I'm not manufacturing anything.
Yeah.
You don't have to manufacture anything. Just give it a shot. So.
What is the value for worship leaders in our churches? Most of our churches are under 300, 400. This is a different conversation for larger churches, mega churches. But for our churches under 400, what is the value of putting 6th through 12th grade into some of those positions in worship? Like,
man.
What's the risk? What's the reward?
I mean, the risk is obviously that they're going to be bad, and it might sound bad.
Sure.
The reward is that they see that you're serious.
Yeah.
The reward is that, I was 13. Yeah, I was 13. My youth pastor called me up. He's like, hey, I'm playing at this night of worship up on, some church was up Montesano Mountain in Huntsville. And he's like, you want to play with me and the drummer and a bass player? I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's go do it. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. It was not good. I guarantee you it was not good. On this Yamaha SY-77, it had one decent sound. It was that DX7 piano sound.
Doogie Howser.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Chimes of Freedom was what it sounded like. But anyway, he just really invested in me and gave me those opportunities. Brad was awesome at that, and really. From that, we were able to built a youth band out of that.
Wow.
And then the youth band began to serve in the main service.
Yeah.
And it's just, the talent's there. I mean, we have some very, very talented kids in the vineyard. And, I get to see some of them come through. We do a worship track where during the activity time each day, some kids prior to camp will have signed up to do worship tracks. So instead of doing the zip line, instead of doing canoes, instead of doing the climbing wall or whatever, they've chosen that they're going to spend time getting, learning about worship, getting better at band dynamics,
brilliant,
writing songs together that are pretty good, Wow. It's just wild. And so this track, that's how we find kids to play for the next year sometimes. But it's just really cool to see these kids that are very committed and very talented. And so, yeah, for a local church, like, it's not just that you're going to fill a volunteer slot, it's that you're going to be planting seeds in these kids that are going to bear fruit in so many different ways down the road.
Yeah.
Some of them for your church now, sure, but planting seeds in them, giving them that identity, giving them that that experience,
and making
so huge.
Making disciples.
Yes.
So often the stuff that's going on in that youth room in our churches, with that youth drum set with the dust on it, and the youth sound mixer,
yes.
The Mackie mixer back there collecting dust. We've easily siloed our youth.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that's the silo is intentional and important to have some separation in learning environments. Camp Vineyard was so beautiful seeing so many adults within our movement that I know and love there with their kids, and their kids experiencing God and the kingdom of God on the spectrum, similar spectrum that the adults experience. Some during worship are sitting there with their arms crossed or, not engaging at all demonstratively. And some are, jumping up and down and going crazy. And, so it's the same spectrum as the adults. And they're growing and they're learning and you gave them an opportunity to do all the things that we do in Big Boy Church.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so beautiful and it's so good. And you did lean into some of all the cliches of playing and the lights and some of the fog and some of those things just to help remove obstacles, which was so helpful for me, except when I busted my buns playing kickball in the rain.
Oh.
Still recovering, the tailbone still recovering, but thanks for that, John.
You're welcome.
Putting the adults in there.
You're welcome.
I seriously thought I was just going to go to camp and be able to do that laptop, like, off in the back thing the whole time.
Nope.
And you actually put us to work.
You're welcome. Yeah, but that's one of our values is that we are, our kids in their cabins, they're with their church, but on their teams, they're mixed up with different churches, and the adults are mixed up with different churches. And the reason that so many of our kids and youth pastors and youth leaders are so tight in the Southeast region that come to this kind of stuff nationally, what do you see hanging out? You see kids from the churches that come to camp hanging out at these things. You see, so many people that have made connections at camp as adults because we survived that week.
So good, John. And here's the thing: is you and Melissa have built this kingdom, but you have given it back to the vineyard.
Yeah.
Like, you don't keep it for yourself. I see so many people, they build these things and they get successful like yours did just a few years into it, like wildly successful, like sold out, like people calling and crying and begging, can we get in this year? But you give it back to the vineyard and you say, hey, what we have is yours and we need what you have. Like, you don't create your own little thing, but you've given it back to us, and I'm just so thankful for that. And in so many ways, you have always said yes to the invitation. You've never asked me, well, how much? What does it pay? What's the green room situation? Do I have extra pillows? Is it square, rectangular pillows?
Well, because I already know the answers to all those questions.
It doesn't pay. There's square pillows, and there's 17,000 steps going up to the stage.
Bring the organ.
So I'm thankful for you saying yes. You are an incredible human being, and I love you dearly, and thank the Lord for you. And if you guys follow John's local church journey, Restoration Vineyard in Chatty, if you're ever in Chatty, beautiful town to visit, you got to go hang out with John. And we're just so thankful for you in all these things. We covered a lot of ground with youth and with money and with keyboard stuff, so we hope this has been helpful for you guys.
I want to leave them with one tool, one practical tool.
Come on.
Both a encouragement and also a practical tool. The thing that everybody wants, whether it's kids or adults, they want is time. That's what they want, is they want that time. And because it's with that time that we are able to build those shared stories, build that trust. And the one practical thing that I found in my experience, both as a worship director and also as someone trying to integrate youth into my worship ministry, was what we called a hangout once a month.
Yeah.
It was second Tuesday, 7 p.m. to whenever, where it's like, hey, band, y'all come. and we're going to play. And if all regulars show up, then we'll work on the songs that we want to start doing so we can break arrangements and save time for Sundays. If it's mostly newer folks, whether they're kids, youth or adults, we're going to play catalog songs and just get that seat time together, playing together. And sometimes we're not even going to play worship music because maybe, like I have friends who would play at the church that like we had played in cover bands together at weddings and stuff. And so like they'd come and it's like, all right, well, we're going to play some Bill Withers covers now or whatever.
Sure.
And for so many church musicians who've never done that, it's like playing music that's not just church music is huge, especially for the young ones, where they get to, they get to learn in a different way. But yeah, and it's all about the time together, because where else are your two drummers going to hang out?
So good. Yeah.
Where else are your bass players going to hang out? Where else is your drummer who's wanted to learn bass going to get a chance to play with other human beings?
Yeah.
That was the kind of environment we built with that.
Wow.
And it just we're working to get this thing going now that Restoration's in a more stable spot of our own now. We're going to get these things going for us again, because it's such a big tool to build that. So yeah, that's my practical thing. Whether you're talking about bringing in youth, whether you're talking about getting your band tighter and or whatever, monthly hangout, however you can do it, play music together. Just play music together in a low pressure environment. That's not Sunday morning where you're trying to, whatever reason, arrange 7 songs when you probably should just be doing 5.
Just hang, man.
Just hang out, play music together, and
so good.
It's amazing the fruit that will bear.
That's a good word. Well, thanks, John Meek.
Yes, sir.
Love you and appreciate you.
Appreciate it,
guys, thanks so much for jumping on the Ferment today. Hope you guys have a great week. Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. First of all, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media. Instagram at The Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.